Welcome to Claim Your Confidence, a podcast that will introduce you to the most powerful people in the world. No matter what obstacles you face, Claim Your Confidence will inspire and motivate you to go after the life you want. Are you ready to claim your confidence?
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Claim Your Confidence. I'm Lydia Fenet, coming to you from Rockefeller Center in New York City. It is summer, it is beautiful outside, and I am so excited to be here with my next guest. Emma Mcilroy is the co-founder and CEO of WILDFANG, one of the fastest growing retail brands in the U.S. And the brand exists to help every kind of woman become the best version of herself. Emma, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Sorry I couldn't be at the Rockefeller Center in New York.
I know, although you're in LA, so I think you always get a pass to be in LA. So, Emma, I spent the morning watching your TED Talk, and I am one of over 100,000 people who have watched this TED Talk. I sobbed at the end, which, if you know me, means nothing, because I love nothing more than a really well-done speech with something that just absolutely punches you in the stomach at the end and brings the tears. It's an incredible speech. It's called 2 Words That Stand Between You and Your Next Big Idea. Tell me a little bit about what yeah, maybe means, if you're a yeah, maybe kind of person.
Yeah, what yeah maybe means. Well, thanks for watching the TED Talk. I really appreciate that. That was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. As a quick side note, when you're not a academic or a researcher, the idea of giving a TED Talk is just overwhelming and terrifying, because people are like, just it's really easy. Just get up there and give one good idea that no one's heard before. Oh, okay. Just that. Can
I just say, before you dive in, I want to interrupt you for just 1 second and tell you this. I teach public speaking. You are a fantastic public speaker. That was my one biggest takeaway from that. That is something you should do for the rest of your life.
I really appreciate that. I'm not Brene Brown, right? So the idea that you've spent your whole life focused on this one thing, in this one space that you are a world expert in is terrifying for those of us who are just out there building small businesses. So it was a really overwhelming prospect. The other thing that is fun to know about TED in Portland is it's actually the biggest TED in North America.
Is that right?
So it's at the Schnitz, and what happens is there's 3,700 people there. And so you kind of you walk out, and I'm pretty confident, generally, and you walk out and you look at the first row and you're like, yeah, I got it. And then you look at the second row and you're like, okay. Then you look at the third row and you're like, oh my God, there's a 4th tier on this thing, And so overall, it's a truly terrifying thing to do. Very glad I did it. Yeah, maybe is a really easy thing to say and a really hard thing to do. So yeah, maybe is the idea of reacting with potential hope, openness to an idea. So this is not a concept of wild positivity. That's not what it's about. It's not that everything works and everything will be great. It's just that often in our lives, whether it's our colleagues, whether it's our direct reports, whether it's our kids, whether it's our partner, people present us thoughts and ideas, and it's so easy to shut them down. And particularly if you get into a position of leadership, you are so often rewarded for your critical thinking. And that is something that people want to see from you. And so you get very quick at it under pressure. And so you do shut down potential. And so, yeah, maybe are these 2 words that, in my opinion, open up potential. And so that's what the whole speech is about. And it's centered around, I don't want to give too much away, but it's centered around a very special moment I had with my mom when I was 7. So
I always start off this podcast by asking people about who they were when they were little. And that story made me laugh on many levels because it answered the question before we even got on the podcast. But you talk about being a 7-year-old girl who loved fossil hunting. So let's start there. Tell me about who you were as a child, Emma.
Yeah, I was affectionately called by some of my friends later in life Rushmore, because if there was a club, I would join it, It didn't mean I was particularly good at it, but I really wanted to be a part of all of those clubs. And I'm also an enormous nerd. So if you catch my wife and I on a weekend now, we're either playing an escape room or a board game. I think that started early for me. Fossil hunting is cooler than it sounds.
Yeah, sure.
So fossil hunting was something my mom's friend taught me how to do, and she taught me to look. I was a really big science kid, and I loved science, and so she taught me how to look for certain things in the rock, and how the fossils formed, and so I kind of became obsessed with that. And so honestly, I am not a parent yet. I'm actually 7 months pregnant.
Oh my gosh,
But
congratulations.
yeah, I've got the bump going on, and the compression socks in the LA summer.
Pregnancy is great.
Yeah, we can talk. That's a separate podcast. But yeah, so I don't profess to be any kind of parental voice on matters of parenting, but I will say it's a great tactic to take your kid out fossil hunting, because that's a big wide open space. There's a lot of rocks on the beach. Like you can really be out there for a while. So I think for me, it was a thing I got pretty into as a kid, in a cacophony of other things that I got into. I was really into sport. I was really into art. I would say jack of all trades, master of none is probably what I was as a kid. But I think there's something really special, and I grew up, you can probably hear the accent, I grew up in Ireland. And so there's something really special when we kind of let our kids be kids, and we let them explore things. And I feel when we talk about privilege and going through the world with privilege, and privilege can mean a lot of things. For me, that's what I think about when I think about privilege. I think about the way I was allowed to explore and raise and be raised. And that wasn't necessarily anything to do, we didn't grow up with money. It wasn't about that. It was just more like I was really encouraged and I was really supported, and not every kid gets that, right? And so whether it was fossil hunting or hurdles or, an art class, I got the opportunity to have a go and make a mess and do some of that stuff. So yeah, the fossil hunting thing was a few years of my life that I was really into. And I don't want to spoil the story for people, but I will say that there is a museum in Belfast where I will always be 7 years old, Lydia.
Yeah, absolutely. From hearing that talk, it's true. And I don't think that you ruin this story by saying that one of the greatest parts about it is that it's one of those amazing things that worked out in a way that you could never have expected, and certainly became an incredible cornerstone for being able to give a speech like that. But it also, in my opinion, showed you a lot about the kind of parenting that you're talking about. And I think a lot of people are coming around to this as well. The idea that we're not hovering over our children, providing all of the answers at all times, but actually giving them the rope in which to go out and find things and explore, and to be inquisitive, and frankly, to be a little bit bored. I'm sure it can be boring to be a fossil hunter at times, but these aren't necessarily bad things. When you think back on your childhood, did you feel more confident as a result of the fact that your parents gave you that ability to try things and perhaps fail along the way?
For sure. Sure. I was probably overly confident, not in an arrogance component, just I probably didn't realize the vastness of my weaknesses. When you are really brought up to embrace failure, and that's what the talk's about, right? And I talk a lot about that now in my work. The idea that I had of what I'd found that day on the beach as a 7-year-old was completely wrong. It was completely and utterly wrong. And that doesn't matter. That's not what it's about. It's about this beautiful journey that you can go on, and this incredible place you can end up when you just kind of remain open and follow your passions and follow your heart a little bit. And so I use that in my everyday work. I think at this point in startup, I would like to say every mistake that's possible to be made, but I've certainly made most of them. And I'm not sad about that, and I'm not worse for it, right? And so as a kid, the only reason that you're not doing it right is if someone scolds you or tells you you're not doing it right? So I didn't know that most of what I was doing was wrong. So I probably did walk through the world with slightly more confidence than my talents deserved me to. But that's a beautiful thing, and it can only happen in childhood, right? The awareness that comes after being a teenager doesn't allow you that permission. So yeah, it's a very cliched topic, failure, but I'm deeply passionate about it because I think women have less permission than men in that space. And I also think it's just something that we're generally scared of. And yet for me, everything great in my life has come from some kind of a failure where I have an openness to learning, I have an openness to evolution.
Yeah, absolutely. Failure is such an incredible learning tool. There's no question about it. And at the time, it doesn't ever feel particularly good. But then when you look back, you can always sort of see either what it taught you or what you learned and hid from everyone, but that you internalized and took on along the way, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it comes back to, you mentioned it, the confidence, right? Like next time you're in that situation, you just have so much more resilience and so many more tools in the toolkit, and that starts to build the confidence. That starts to make you better in those situations.
Yeah. So you grew up in Ireland. What took you out of Ireland? Where was your next stop?
So I went to Emmanuel College in Cambridge. It's a great college. And also taught me a lot about life and a lot about who I was as a person. And I felt wildly inadequate to be there because of all the reasons that you can probably imagine, and the renown that it has around the world. It's a little bit like the TED Talk situation again, right? So yeah, I went and did that for 4 years. I did a pretty hardcore science degree that was a real blessing. And I learned how to think. That's kind of what you learn how to do at that university, and how to find holes and how to find perspective, and look at things from 100 different ways so that you don't get stuck. So I did that for a little bit. And then truthfully, I did what everybody did in my university, which was I went to London to try and make money. And so I took a job in banking, which was not uncommon. And I absolutely hated it, and I was becoming a terrible person. And I did it for about a year and then moved on to do something else.
Can I ask you, when you said that about going to London, then everyone going to work in finance, when you were younger, before you were going to Cambridge, what were you thinking your life was going to be? You know, if you think of a 7-year-old fossil hunter, Cambridge and working at Barclays in London doesn't necessarily seem like the logical next step.
No, it wasn't.
What was it?
Yeah, there was 2 things I wanted to be when I was a kid. One was to write and illustrate my own books. And I've actually done that. I've written 2 kids' books and I've illustrated one of them. So I've chipped away at that one. And then the other thing I wanted to be was an athlete. So my brother, my middle brother was an Olympic runner. He was top 10 in the world. And I ran for Ireland, and I really wanted to run in the Olympics. I really wanted to be an Olympian. And there's this weird point that you face. I don't know if I was good enough, to be honest, but there's this weird inflection point you face where you have to decide how much you're going to put towards it for the rest of your life, because it's a really risky place to go be a pro athlete, and especially in track and field, the money's not great, right? So I picked the more conventional path, but I would say there are through lines between the decisions that I made. But you're right, ending up in finance was a very odd place for me to be, but it didn't last too long for that reason. Yeah.
You talk about the through lines. What were the through lines?
An openness to possibility beyond the obvious. So like Cambridge, you know, when my teacher told me to apply for Cambridge, I said, I'm not going to Cambridge because it's just full of posh people, you know, and I don't want to go. And actually she dragged me out of class. It was my careers teacher, Miss Richardson, and she dragged me out of class the last day that the applications were due and said, you got to do this, you know, you'll regret this for the rest of your life. And thank God she did. But I had so many ideas of what I thought it was. And when I really got into the process and got under the skin of it, I realized it was so much more, right? And so for me, it's about making sure that I'm taking in every viewpoint, every piece of data that I have, and really asking myself, where might I be going wrong here? What might I have made an assumption on that I don't have enough data to back up, right? Where might I be closed-minded or somehow missing a beat? And then when I went to Cambridge, you know, most of what they do at Cambridge is mess with your head. So every time you think you know the answer, someone smarter than you says, what if it was this? And you're like, wow, I have absolutely no way to in any way refute that theory, because that sounds really smart and plausible, right? And so what it teaches you to do is think. So now when I look at a finance problem, or now when I look at a brand problem, or I have a point of view, but I always kind of assume that there might be 10 other points of view that I'm missing, and there might be, you know, 5 of them that are better than mine. And it just forces you to think from different perspectives and take in a lot of information, and I'll still make the decision. But I think just that openness and trying to remain open, and it's so hard because we make decisions at such speed under such pressure, and, you know, we've got a lot going on in our lives and we're tired, but any way that you can remain mentally open and open to perspective, I think is kind of my through line. So again, I went to the bank, which was a step made out of a number of very practical decisions, right? I needed a job, I needed to make money, I needed to pay off my loans. I didn't, you know, my mom and dad couldn't support me through that. So I went to London and took a job in finance, and I was good at it. And it was real self-reflection to say, I don't want to be this person. And that is no shade. I know a lot of amazing people in finance, but the worst sides of me were being rewarded. I was being rewarded for being very aggressive, very competitive, very arrogant. You know, like the parts of me that do not need enhancement were becoming real centers for reward. And so I looked around the bank, and at the time, Barclays was the main sponsor of the Premier League, right? And so I'm a sports fanatic. Like I told you, my brother was a professional athlete. I've played a lot of different sports. coached a lot of different sports. I'm typically glued to a TV over the weekend, whether it's Angel City or Liverpool or Rory McIlroy or whatever it is, right? And so I got the opportunity to join that team. And if I hadn't been at Barclays, I would never got the opportunity to join that team. If I hadn't joined that team, I would never went to Nike. If I hadn't went to Nike, I wouldn't have started WILDFANG, right? So everything, there's a great Steve Jobs speech about looking backwards and the dots make sense, right? So, yeah. But in each moment, I think it's trying to know thyself as much as you can possibly do that, and remain open to possibility and opportunity. And at the same time, I wasn't in the right place in that first team that I ended up at in Barclays, right? And so that self-awareness to say, this isn't working for me. Something's not, my energy's not right. Like I'm not energetically in a good place. What is within my control? Where can I go next? What decisions can I make? And knowing myself well enough to know what does drive me, what are my passions, what are my skill sets, right? And go follow those. So yeah, I do think there's through lines, even though it sounds really weird on a podcast.
It's interesting when I listen to you talk about this. I feel like there's so many entrepreneurial lessons for people who are on this journey right now, just in terms of what you've said about being okay with a variety of different opinions and still making one that you feel is right to you, but also the importance of understanding the things that you're passionate about and moving towards those. I think there's so many people who've been in that job before, and I can say this even from a personal level, looking around and thinking to yourself, okay, this is great, and I'm sure it looks great to everyone else. It's actually not really what I want to do. So why am I here, and what drives that? Obviously, the financial situation is a huge piece for most people. I mean, for all of us, really. You have to be able to afford the life that you want in order to live a life that feels stable and healthy for you and your family. But I think the other side of that, too, is finding that thing that gets you up out of bed every day and makes you move towards something that feels purposeful and feels exciting to you, because that's really what life is about in many ways.
For sure. And I think the one caveat I'll add to that is I'm a radical incrementalist. So sometimes I think when we say that stuff, people go, "Oh my God, what's my thing?" Like what am I passionate about? And for me, it's like, what's the 1%? What's the 2%? Can you make 2% of a shift to move a little bit closer to what either energetically or at a heart and soul level you think you're meant to be doing? Because the reality is, if you can make 2% shift every 6 months, you wake up in 3 years and you're 20% closer to where you want it to be, right? And so it doesn't have to be this enormous, like, oh my God, I'm going to quit my job tomorrow and go do this thing. For me, it's about that self-awareness and continual, and that it's very close to the maybe principle. It's hard. It's not sexy. It's hard to keep yourself that honest. It's hard to continually make small tweaks to move in the right direction. Yeah, so that would be the one other thing I would add to that.
Yeah, I find that a lot of my business decisions are gut related. I can sort of feel, I like to say, if there's something that someone presents me with as an opportunity, I often feel like if I'm a horse being dragged to a barn, that is something I should not do. And it really is that visceral. Someone calls and says, would you be interested in doing this? And I can feel myself resisting it. I know what the end product of that, having worked in the corporate world for 20 years, which is me not wanting to sign an email and not wanting to sit down and do that. All those things that just lead up to deleting me of energy to do the things that I want to do. So that for me has really been a guiding force in the past couple of years, and I think goes hand in hand with what you're saying. So if Barclays was the thing that made you feel depleted, Nike made you feel the opposite, or did you feel like that was a 2% increase?
No, Nike was more than the 2% increase. I remember my first interview in a pub in London, and
that bodes well right there, right?
Yeah, 100%. It was an Irish pub too in London.
Yeah. Drinking Guinness. It's a great place.
The guy who'd taken over just said, he was like, we're building this team. It's going to be category focused. It was right as Nike made a shift to be category focused from being like footwear, apparel, and equipment. They were moving into like sport specific categories, so like running, football. And he said, we need young energy. We need people who know the sport. And I was 24, 25. And he said, will you go anywhere in the world for me? And, that's one of those moments where you look back and you're like, that was a good answer. I gave a good answer that day. You know what I mean? I won't always give a good answer, but that day I gave a good answer. And I said, yeah.
Yeah.
And he said, great. That's all it's all I need to know. And I was over there praying for South Korea. I was like, put me somewhere really cool that I've never been before. And he was like, you're going to Beaverton. And I was like, sorry, where? Where am I going?
Beaverton, quick Google search.
Yeah, quick Google search, Beavertown. And so, Yeah, look, I'm sport obsessed. I love sport. I think sport is one of these incredible, a little bit like music or art. It's one of these incredible through lines that cuts through every section of society, and it cuts through every socioeconomic level, and it creates unity, and it's beautiful, right? Like
Yeah.
I am such a proponent of sport. It teaches us stuff. We learn from it, and I want everyone to have access to it in all levels. And so I was in a company where no one gave a shit about me, right? When you are in
Yeah.
a bank, what matters is making money. I
Right.
was in the team who spent money. So
Oh.
I couldn't have been a more disgusting team to most of the people who worked there, right? And so, then you go to Nike, and it's an entire corporation of humans who share your passion and vision, right? And so, I would say the first thing, there's the obvious stuff, right? Like the material I was working on. To your point about dragging a horse to water, the material I was working on was easy for me. It's not exciting every day, but it was facile. It was natural. It felt very familiar for me, right? And that in itself is a joy. But then on top of that, the biggest thing that I took from that, and I'm trying to build in my company now, is a group of people with a shared mission and passion. Man, once you've had that, hard to go back from it, because it just makes the work so much easier, when everyone's there with the same kind of motivation and desire. And that's what's really special about Nike, or certainly was when I was there. So yeah, thank God I did a couple of years in the UK, and then they moved me over to the US, the global team, and then I bounced around a little bit before I started WildFang.
I love the story of how you started WildFang. So presumably you were still working at Nike at this point.
I was still working at Nike, and I had no intention of leaving.
So you walk into a department store with your friend, and you tell the rest of
Yes.
this story.
When we walked into Urban Outfitters, we were just shopping. That's all we were doing. We were shopping. And we wandered through the women's section, and I'd never really struggled to find clothes before. I'd always made it work. I was looking for a graphic tee. She was looking for a blazer, and all the blazers in the women's section had these like fake weird pockets where you can't put your fingernails in.
Oh, yeah. I know. What are those?
Well, you're like, what are you carrying there? Like, what,
Yeah.
am I carrying a paper clip? Like, what,
But
Which,
not
by the
even.
way,
You can't fit a paperclip in there.
Totally.
It's tiny.
And there's a whole story about why women don't get pockets, so we can dive into that later. But yeah, so she couldn't find a blazer she liked, and they all flared out at the hips, and they were weird. And then all the t-shirts had this like bohemian vibe. They were very scoopy necks. They were like wearing flowers, and and that's chill if that's your vibe. But I was looking for something a little more provocative. And so we wandered into the men's section, and it was like, that moment in the Holy Grail when like the classical music kicked in. It was like, whoa, wait a minute. All the dudes get what? And there were like rows of these incredible graphic tees. There were verbiage tees. There were bold tees. There were funny tees. There were photo tee. And I was like, wait, what? And then in the blazer section, there was amazing lining, real pockets, real buttons, elbow patches, no elbow patches, tons of different color material. I was like, wait, what? And so we just had this moment where we were like, we both tried on some stuff and it didn't fit. For me, it was really high in the neck. So the crew neck was really high and the hips were really tight. And then for her, she's tiny, she's 5'2", and it just all looked like massive on her. It looked stupid. And so we kind of had this moment where it was like, wow, that is so weird. Now, this was 2011. We were like, that's so weird that it's 2011 and you have to pick styles of clothing. We get fit. Fit, we can talk about all day. Fit is a big, big area to crack. But why are styles and silhouettes exclusively reserved based on gender? That is weird. That is really weird. And so that was kind of where it all started. And she said, hey, I'm going to start a little shop in Portland, and I'm going to bring my dog to work, and we're going to sell some clothes. And I was like, that is great. You should knock yourself out. I am not going to do that. I am working with Cristiano Ronaldo, and I am going to Brazil next year for the Olympics, and I am really good. I love my life.
Have fun with your dog.
And then what happened was she was like, hey, you do a lot of consumer insights for Nike. Will you go do some consumer insights for me? Make sure I'm not wasting my time. And I was like, absolutely. And so on my nights and weekends, I interviewed 43 people in their home, each for about 4 hours. And it was after that work that I was like, ooh, this is a really big thing. This is much bigger than I originally gave it credit for. And I think, first and foremost, what I am, and probably the only thing I'm any good at is being a brand builder and building a brand, which for me is a strong emotional connection with a consumer. And you don't get that many chances in your life to do that as a brand marketer. Usually you're working on other people's brands. I've worked on Barclays brands. I've worked on Nike's brands, right? And so And that's great. And that's cool. And you learn a lot and you have a lot of resources. But to really start a brand and start a brand that has the potential to change the zeitgeist, that doesn't come up very often. And so I couldn't resist. It was too juicy. I said, hey, I'm going to go do it. And so we did. And, we sold our first thing in 2013. So it's been about 10 years. And here we are.
That made it seem so easy. So let's start 10 years ago, because I feel like there's a lot that happened in those 10 years. First and foremost, the white space to sit in 43 people's living rooms for 4 hours. I mean, there must be a story in that. There's probably a book in that. But what were you hearing? What was it in those conversations that made you think to yourself, like, there's really a market here and we could do it? What was it? Was there something that when someone said, was it just the repetition of things that was being said? I'm asking because I wonder, as you're building a business, what are these questions that you're asking?
Consumer insights is my jam, qualitative consumer insights. And people get really scared of it. They're like, how do I build a methodology? How do I build an immersion group? How do I build a focus group? Whatever it is, there's 100 different tactics you can use. And the reality is qualitative research is one question, which is why. And that's it. That's the question you need. And most people don't ask it, and they're scared, or they stop. So I say to you, Lydia, why did you buy that sweater?
The one that I'm wearing? I'm wearing because I liked it. Is that an answer?
Why did you like it?
Because I love things with stripes that are comfortable, and I'm tall, and it fits well.
Do you see how much by that second why? Do you see how many more factors I learned about you?
Yeah.
I learned about your fit. I learned about your height. I learned probably where there's a challenge for you generally in the marketplace. And I learned that you love stripes, right? Most people stop. They stop too early. And they never really get to know what's in front of them. And then they come back with inverted commas research and they're like, here's what I learned. And you're like, you didn't learn anything. Because you never asked the actual question, which is why. And it's funny because kids do it, right? So we're talking about, maybe. Kids do it. They go, why? Yeah. And they're actually the greatest insights vehicles of all time because they never stop. And so that's the first thing I'll say. To get great qualitative insights, it's really simple. You just keep asking why. And you usually find out a lot more than you thought you might. And it's a lot less scary than you think. In terms of what we found out specifically, yes, we were in their living rooms. We were also in their wardrobe. We also did a little online shopping exercise. So we went through their social media accounts, right? So we did a bunch of different things. And basically, we summarized that work into an equation. And the equation was this. Most of these people wanted this product to exist. And they were either wanting it to exist or had already figured out how to access it somehow. So what that means is they were going to if they were very fashionable, they were going to Goodwill. And they were either getting it tailored from the men's department or they were making it work because they know enough about fashion and shape to know how to do that. They have a high sense of style. They were stealing it from their boyfriend. They were going through their grandpa's wardrobe. They were shopping in the men's department. I remember when I started WILDFANG, I met the CEO at Jack Threads and I started to pitch him, and I'm sitting there and I'm pitching this straight white guy and I'm waiting for Bill to tell me like, I don't get it. And I didn't even get the first sentence completed. And he said, oh yeah, I get it. Like 40% of our customers are women and they buy for themselves because they're buying in smaller sizes. And it was like, wait,
wow.
What? So, the first thing was the product, I talked to a lot of different people. Now, admittedly, the research was biased because it was all done in Portland, Oregon, but it was a very wide swathe of people. And they all wanted the product to exist. Either they were trying to access it or they already had figured out a hack, but they wanted the product to exist. The second thing was they all followed the same people on social media, which was weird because it was a pretty broad group of people, which told me there is a tonality and an attitude that they were tapping into, right? And then the third thing was we did a number of exercises in qualitative insight. We would call them like brand visualization exercises or imaginary exercises, a bunch of names for them, but basically where you try to get people to create a future state, which is really hard. It's really hard to do in insight. Long story short, no one had a favorite retailer. Didn't matter how I approached the question. Didn't matter if I was taking them to Desert Island. Didn't matter if they were walking in the doors with their eyes shut and they just feel at home. Where are they? We went through a ton of different ways in a visualization. Couldn't name it, right? Basically what came back was, it's probably this shop because it has so much stuff and something's always on sale that I'll find something. And that was pretty depressing, right? For a marketer, the idea that just if there's enough stuff and it's discounted enough, you'll find something, right? And so basically the equation became, if you can serve up this product with this brand attitude, you might become their favorite store. That was it. It was that simple. And once the equation kind of took hold, it was like, man, I want to go see if I can fulfill the equation. I want to go see if I can give people a better vision of retail and a home that they feel like they belong in, that that they're excited to walk in the door.
And there was no one doing it at that point. There was no one marrying that brand attitude that you wanted to come. And what was that brand attitude? What were you seeing? What was the market that you wanted to fill at that point?
Obviously, the conversation around gender has shifted wildly in the last 10 years. Like we knew it was going to shift and we felt it was going to shift. We did not know it was going to shift to the extent or speed that it did shift, right? So, and hopefully if you're a good brand marketer, you're at the front of those conversations, whatever your space is. I think, we've always been a women's focused brand, women and non-binary. That's where the bulk of our customers are. And I think for most women, it was an attitude that allowed them to be exactly who they were, right? So you hear me in my TED Talk say, we're not, I wasn't one thing because none of us really are, right? And so I think there were a lot of brands, even the name, if you look at the name WILDFANG, or in German it would be WILDFANG, it's two words slammed together. Wild is this ferocious, raw energy. Wild, wild, And then Fang is this safety, this capture, this protection, this community, right? And so you slam them together and you get both. And that was super important from the start because, I don't need to tell you this, but a lot of us as women had been told there were so many great brands that were saying, build community, sit around the fire, hold hands and sing Kumbaya. And that is great. I have no problem with that. That is wonderful if that gives you strength and empowerment. On the other hand, there were a few brands, and again, I'm not going to name check because I don't want to speak on anyone else's brand, but very rebellious. Burn it down, burn it to the ground, go out there and take the patriarchy apart or take the system apart or get what you deserve and throw a flamethrower and give no shits about anybody else while you do it. And again, also necessary, right? Like, I'm a huge activist. We all have a place in the movement. It was interesting to me that as we were doing this research and as we were deciding who we wanted to be and where the space was, it was like, I have a question. What if I want to be both? Yeah. Like, what if some days I walk out and I want to flamethrower the patriarchy, but then kind of in the afternoon, I just want a hug from my dog because it hasn't been a great day, right? Like, why is that
can't we have
okay?
both? Yeah,
why can't I be
point.
both?
Yeah.
Why am I not allowed the dimensionality to be like wildly inspiring and also incredibly flawed? Like, where is that space? And that was always what WILDFANG was. It was go get it. And also, if you don't totally nail it today, there's going to be a whole group of people right here that have got your back.
Yeah.
And a community who are just as badass and just as flawed as you that you can tap into, right? And so that from the start was kind of the ethos. Now, how does that translate in brand values? I'm not obviously going to give you our secret sauce, but it's got that rebellious attitude. It's got that strength. It's also got that positivity. Hopefully we are desired. Hopefully we're a little bit ahead of you each time, pushing you outside of your comfort zone, right? So there's a number of factors involved in those brand values, but really it was just allowing women to be, and I'm not going to swear anymore on your podcast, but just who they wanted to be and who they felt permission to be. We didn't feel like anybody had given them that before, which was weird,
Yeah. What confidence did it take you, having never launched a brand, to walk out and launch this? Sort of something that no one's really doing. You have this great idea and you put it out there. What do you do after you say, okay, let's go? Did you leave Nike? Were you still there?
No, I did leave Nike. The weird thing is about a startup, you can't really do it till you do it. I remember an early stage investor saying to me, are you all in? And I was like, what do you mean? They were like, have you quit your job? And I was like, no, but I'm going to, I'm doing some freelance. And they were like, well, if you're not all in, why would I go all in? Like,
oh, so interesting.
And it was oh, okay, I get it now, right? And so I think you do have to make that switch decision to say, this is it. I am going to lead the charge on this, and this is going to become a big part of my life. So I will say that. I think you are, this podcast has been somewhat like therapy. I think we're seeing a through line with me, which is, there was probably a healthy amount of naivety involved, which again is, I'm not going to shit on myself for that because, a leap of faith is a leap of faith for a reason, right? Yeah. Like, it doesn't matter how much time you study religion or like, that is at the crux of a leap of faith is that you're stepping into an unknown, right?
Yeah,
and that comes with wild risk and magical possibility, right? Both at the same time. And so I was probably very privileged to have enough of that naivety and enough of a safety net in that, I wasn't going to be on the street, right? Like I took out my 401k, I cashed that in. I put someone else in I'd bought an apartment and I put someone else in it and they paid the rent and I stayed with friends, right? Like I was able to figure it out, which not everybody can do. And I'm super aware of that. But that naivety and that childlike wonder is really important to making big, scary, healthy decisions. Because if you add up all the risk, you'll just never do it. Like you just won't, right? And so I had no idea what I was doing. Even like, I like to say that I'm world-class at brand, but the truth is I was world-class at brand in a multi-billion-dollar brand in a very specific niche component of the company, right? Like I actually didn't know when you start something from $0 with zero budgets, like it's such a different animal. Like you don't have 2,000 retail doors to just drop a story in that people will react to. You don't have 1 million people on your Facebook group to just drop a story into, right? Like you are literally fighting tooth and nail from the start. So it's super different. So actually, if I'm really honest with myself, I wasn't particularly qualified to build a brand either at that point. I think it's about how fast you can learn. I think it's about the people around you. They keep you going in the worst moments. So who else can you convince to be as stupid as you and come with you? You know, you could pick any function in the business and probably even within a function, you could pick a year and I could give you a different mistake. So I've certainly ran headlong into a whole bunch of failure over the last 10 years. But otherwise, you know, my other option was to stay at corporate. I would have made a lot more money by now. And I would have a very, very strong niche skill set. And I just don't think I would be me. I don't think I would be as fulfilled or satisfied or have as many tools in my toolkit.
So what's been the most interesting thing that's happened since you started this company that you would never have expected?
One of the ones that sticks with me the most, because it was a pinch me moment, was I had a friend, it's a true story. I had a friend who phoned me. It was a Friday night. I was still in the office. It was really late. The business, it was probably not long before that TED Talk. Business was in a tough place. You know, at that point, I wasn't taking much of a salary. So you have no social life. You have no friends. And my phone went off on this Friday evening, early evening, and somebody from Nike had a couple of beers, one of my old friends, and said, ha, 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 don't you wish you still worked at Nike? And I was like, what's going on? And they sent me a bunch of pictures, and it was Janelle Monáe on stage. And Nike does this awesome thing for its employees where you take half-day Fridays. So in the summer, you get a half-day Friday, and they put on these amazing events and stuff like that so that you could enjoy the sun, you could enjoy the outdoors. And Janelle was playing on stage. And, you know, there was just this moment of like, firstly, that's a little bit mean.
Yeah. Like, so maybe not a friend, just an acquaintance.
Yeah. And then secondly, like, oh, what a bummer. Like, what a bummer. Maybe I should have stayed there. You know what I mean? Because what I'm doing right now is looking at a horrible cash flow projection and trying to figure out, you know, 9 more press releases to send on a Friday, you know, on a Friday night. And trying to figure out how to place better ads in Meta. And what they're doing is having an IPA on the grass in the sun watching Janelle Monáe, you know. And so what happened was, and they only meant me positive. There was no harm intended at all. And so I hung up and I thought, man, you know what? I bet Janelle would like WildFang. Janelle really seems like someone who'd like WildFang. And so what I did, it was about 4:30 on a Friday. And so I spent the next 2 hours cold calling, cold emailing, cold DMing. I emailed her record label, her stylist, her publisher, the last person who'd cut her hair, anyone who seemed like they were friends with her on Instagram. Like I went deep and far and wide. Now, I will also acknowledge this was 5 or 6 years ago. Influencer marketing has changed drastically. Social media has changed drastically. But the intent carries, I think. And so, you know, I wrote these notes about why I thought Janelle would love our brand. I include some pictures. I was like, you know, the really interesting thing about marketing in Portland is it is not the center of the universe. It is not LA or New York. Now, that is swings and roundabouts. On the downside, it's very hard to access media, celebrity, entertainment. On the plus side, it means when media, celebrity, and entertainment come to Portland, there's almost nothing for them to do. Oh, and so this is the swing and the roundabout. And so, you know, if you ask someone to come and hang out with you in your store in LA at 8 p.m. on a Friday, do you know how many options you have? I mean, you could pick anything in your head and go do it, right? Same in New York. That doesn't exist in Boise, Idaho. That doesn't exist in Portland, Oregon, right? And so basically I finished this email by saying, you know, we'd really love to style Janelle. We think she'd love our stuff. Here's some stuff I've picked out. Like, let me know, right? By now it's 6:37 on a Friday. My whole team's gone home. I'm still typing away. I have hit into the dark. There is no world where I think I'm getting a response. It's about 8 p.m. and I'm trying to wrap up and my phone goes off and she says, is this Emma? And I said, yeah. Who am I speaking to? She said, this is Kimberly, Janelle Monáe's tour manager. And I was like,
Oh.
And now in that moment, you're like, oh, put your big girl pants on. Of course, I knew I was, and you're like,
hello,
hello,
Kim.
Kimberly. It's so nice to meet you. What can I do for you? And she's like, well, I got your note. I showed it to Janelle. She'd love to come in and shop. Can you keep the store open for her tonight? Like, can she come in tonight? She leaves tomorrow. And I said, of course, absolutely no problem. When will she be here? She said about 20 minutes. I was like, no problems whatsoever. I hung up. Now, at this point, I realized, number one, I can't use our cash register. I can't use our point of sale because I've never been trained on it. 2, I don't work retail, so I have no idea what the inventory is. 3, I'm a terrible stylist. You don't want me to style you. And so all of this is running through my head, knowing that she's on her way and I have 20 minutes to do a pull and to give her this really great experience. A pull is just where we pull all the styles. So fast forward, I call my staff in order, and the first staff member I call is like, boss, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm drunk. It's Friday night. And I was like, that is super fair. Please ignore me. Go enjoy your night. I call my second staff member and they're like, I'm getting a tattoo. How urgent is it? I'm literally halfway through a tattoo. And I was like, no, it's not that urgent. Like,
you're such a good boss. I would have been like, drunk. Yep. Come, I'll give you a beer when you walk in the door. Like, tattoo. I can finish it. Come on in.
So I finally get to a third member of staff who picks up, and there's a whole bunch who don't pick up because they're like, I'm not picking up the boss at 8:30 on Friday night. And so then finally, one of my employees, Kelly, picks up, and I'm like, Kelly, where are you? And she's like, I'm half a mile away. And I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, well, I'm going out for dinner. And I'm like, I will make this up to you. I will buy you dinner for a week. I will take care of you. Can you come in and style Janelle Monáe? And she's like, when? I'm like, she will be
yesterday.
Here in 5 minutes. So you need to be here in under 5 minutes. And she was like, you are kidding me. And I was like, nope. She was like, have we done a pool? I was like, no. I am going to stall her when she gets here. So anyway, fast forward. Janelle walks in. I make it seem super smooth. Like, we've been planning this all day. We do this all the time. Kelly sort of runs in behind her. We throw music on. Janelle shops for 3 hours. Janelle leaves my store at 11:20 p.m. And in that time, she sits on, we have these carving walls in our store. And she sits on a swing in front of a carving wall. And she sings a cappella for no reason, completely unprompted. She sang Charlie Chaplin's Smile.
Oh, my God.
And I do not have a video of that. I have not posted that. This is not the age of social media, but I will remember that moment when she sang a pitch perfect version of Charlie Chaplin's Smile after having shopped for 3 hours on a swing in my store. I will never forget that moment. And so, look, have I done that with 100 other celebrities? Yes. Did I stand outside Patti Smith's dressing room for 3 hours and she didn't come out? Yes. Like, I have 100 of those stories. But when you ask me for one where I go, I'll probably still be thinking about that when I peace out. It was Janelle Monáe singing Charlie Chaplin's Smile on a swing in my store after having shopped for 3 hours and tried on everything I own.
Oh, what a story. I hope you took a picture and sent it back to your friends at Nike. You're like, I'm sure it was fun to see her across the lawn. She's 5 inches from me singing a cappella.
Well,
if you didn't, I hope you will today.
No, we're very lucky. Janelle's become a part of the family. So she's stuck with us. So we're real lucky she continues to support us. But that was where it started.
That's amazing. Gosh. Well, if that is not the biggest maybe story I've ever heard in my life, you're like, yeah, maybe we'll figure it out. Don't worry. Come on in. I mean, I really think that goes back to everything you have talked about in this podcast and everything that clearly your brand is about. So, Emma, this has been such an incredible time spent with you. I feel like I've had too much of your time almost, and we keep you on for another hour. But I know you're pregnant. I know you probably want to get up and walk around. So tell us this. When are you due and what are you having?
I am due on October 1st. And we do not know what we're having for a few reasons. One is there's not enough surprises left in this world.
Yeah.
And 2 is because, if you've followed WILDFANG, you know how I feel about some of the gender norms that we put on society and on kids. And so we're just going to let this kid grow up to be whatever it wants to be, and I'm not going to get in its way. So if it comes out healthy, my wife and I will be real lucky. So yeah, October 1st is the big day.
Oh, congratulations. We will all be praying for a healthy baby for you. Thank you again for spending the time with us. Where can we find you? Where can we find WILDFANG? Where can we follow along with this incredible journey?
We have a really big collection designed by someone that you definitely know, launching in the start of August, just in a couple of weeks. And it's taken me 9 years to make this happen. So she is very special. She's an icon. We love her dearly. So, if you hang out with us on Instagram at We Are WILDFANG, you will see that collection launch, and I hope you love it.
I'm sure we will. Well, Emma, thank you for your time. I want to thank Rock Center for hosting this, Newsstand Studios, and of course, the amazing Joe who makes it all happen. I want everyone to just think about one thing that Emma said as we go on into our week. What are you all in on in your life? I don't think I'm going to stop thinking about that conversation, and I'm going to think more about how I can make that happen in my own life. So wherever you are, I hope that you've enjoyed this podcast. Thank you again to Emma from LA. I hope you have a wonderful week. This is Claim Your Confidence. I'm Lydia Fenet. I look forward to being with you again next Tuesday.